Pride and Prejudice and Prayer. Chapter 1. As the grand chandelier of the ballroom sparkled like a constellation of stars, the air was filled with the soft strains of a waltz, and the laughter of the tun echoed against the gilded walls. Fitzwilliam Darcy, a man of considerable wealth and stature, stood aloof, observing the revelry with a mixture of amusement and disdain. His gaze drifted over the crowd, settling on the elegant figures twirling gracefully across the polished floor. It was then that he overheard the hushed whispers of two ladies, their voices laced with mischief. "I dare say if we could only find a way to compromise Mr. Darcy, we would be the talk of the season," one lady giggled, her eyes sparkling with mischief. The other, a petite creature with an air of innocence, replied, "But how? He is so proud and unyielding. Surely he would never fall for our schemes." Darcy's heart raced as he realized the subject of their conversation was none other than himself. The notion that he could be the target of such a frivolous plot sent a chill down his spine. Panic surged through him as he envisioned the consequences of their machinations. The thought of being compromised, of losing his reputation, was unbearable. With a swift turn, he made his way through the throng of elegantly dressed guests, his mind racing. He could not allow himself to be the subject of their amusement, nor could he bear the thought of being ensnared in a scandal. Each step felt heavier than the last, and the laughter that once seemed so joyful now echoed mockingly in his ears. As he reached the entrance, he paused, glancing back at the scene he was leaving behind. The ladies continued their plotting, oblivious to the turmoil they had caused. With a resolute breath, Darcy stepped into the cool night air, the sounds of the ball fading behind him. He knew he must distance himself from the frivolities of the tun, at least until he could devise a plan to safeguard his honor. As he walked through the dimly lit streets of London, the stars twinkling overhead, he pondered the absurdity of society's expectations. Perhaps it was time to reconsider his place among them. Little did he know, this unexpected turn of events would lead him to a path he had never anticipated, one that would challenge his perceptions of love, honor, and the very nature of matrimony. In the grand drawing room of Darcy House, Fitzwilliam Darcy paced restlessly, his brow furrowed in thought. The flickering candlelight cast shadows on the walls, mirroring the turmoil within him. He thought about the tun in London, a city that once held promise and excitement, but now felt like a gilded cage, suffocating him with its superficiality. "Dear God," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper, "how am I to find a good wife amidst this sea of serpents?" To Darcy, ladies that he had met in London were not the charming creatures of romance. They were cunning and calculating, each one a potential viper ready to strike. He sank into a plush armchair, his hands clasped tightly in prayer. "I seek a woman of virtue, one who possesses both grace and intelligence. Yet all I encounter are those who seek wealth and status. How can I trust any of them?" His heart ached with the weight of his loneliness, the burden of expectations pressing down upon him. "Please grant me guidance," he prayed fervently. "Let me not be deceived by appearances, but rather lead me to a woman who embodies true character." He envisioned a partner who would stand by him, not for his fortune, but for the man he was beneath the title of Mr. Darcy. The clock chimed softly, pulling him from his reverie. He opened his eyes, a newfound determination igniting within him. He would not succumb to despair. Instead, he would navigate the treacherous waters of society with caution, seeking out those who might prove to be genuine. With a deep breath, he rose from his chair, ready to face the world outside. "I will not lose hope," he declared to the empty room. "Somewhere outside the city, there must be a lady who is not a snake, but rather a dove, capable of soaring alongside me." As Fitzwilliam Darcy sat in his study, the flickering candlelight cast soft shadows on the walls, illuminating the carefully arranged books and the polished mahogany desk. The letter from Charles Bingley lay before him, its ink still fresh and the words echoing with warmth and camaraderie. Bingley had invited him to visit his newly leased estate in Hertfordshire, a place that promised both respite and the company of friends. Darcy's mind wandered as he contemplated the journey ahead. He had always found solace in the countryside, where the air was crisp and the landscape stretched endlessly. Yet the thought of mingling with society, particularly with the lively Bingley and his sisters, stirred a mix of anticipation and trepidation within him. He was not one to seek the limelight, preferring the quietude of his own company. But the bond he shared with Bingley was a strong pull. After a moment of reflection, Darcy rose from his chair and began to prepare for his journey. He selected his finest riding attire, ensuring that every detail was impeccable. The dark fabric of his coat contrasted sharply with the crisp white of his cravat, and he took a moment to adjust it in the mirror, satisfied with his appearance. He was a man of stature, and he intended to present himself as such. With a final glance around his study, Darcy stepped outside, the cool air greeting him like an old friend. He mounted his horse, a majestic creature that seemed to share his eagerness for the journey. As they set off, the rhythmic sound of hooves against the cobblestones echoed in the quiet morning, and Darcy felt a sense of freedom wash over him. The road to Hertfordshire was familiar, yet invigorating, lined with trees that whispered secrets of the past. Darcy's mind raced with thoughts of what awaited him: laughter, conversation, and perhaps a chance to meet some lovely ladies. As he rode, he resolved to embrace this visit with an open heart, allowing himself to enjoy the company of friends and the beauty of the countryside. Little did he know that this journey would lead him to discover not only the charm of Hertfordshire, but also the complexities of his own heart. Chapter 2. As Darcy approached Netherfield Park, the grandeur of the estate struck him anew. The sprawling grounds, meticulously manicured gardens, and the elegant facade of the house spoke of wealth and refinement. It was a place that seemed to breathe history. Yet it was the laughter and camaraderie of friendship that drew him here today. Charles Bingley, his affable friend, was already mounted on his horse, a lively chestnut that danced with anticipation. Bingley's face lit up upon seeing Darcy, his smile infectious. "Darcy, come, join me. I'm off to pay a visit to the Bennets. I hear they are quite the lively bunch." Darcy hesitated for a moment, his natural reserve urging him to decline. The Bennets were known for their spirited conversations and boisterous company, a stark contrast to his own more reserved demeanor. Yet the warmth of Bingley's invitation and the promise of a day spent in good company coaxed him into acceptance. "Very well, Bingley, I shall accompany you," Darcy replied, mounting his own horse with a practiced ease. As they rode side by side, the sun cast a golden hue over the landscape, illuminating the path ahead. Upon arriving at the Bennet household, they were greeted with warmth and enthusiasm. Mrs. Bennet, ever the gracious hostess, ushered them inside, her excitement palpable. The drawing room was filled with the lively chatter of the Bennet sisters, each one eager to engage with their guests. As Darcy settled into a conversation with Elizabeth, the second eldest daughter, he found himself captivated by her intelligence and humor. She challenged him in ways he had not anticipated, her sharp tongue and quick wit sparking a connection that both thrilled and unnerved him. The afternoon unfolded with laughter and spirited debates, the atmosphere alive with the energy of youth and friendship. Darcy, for the first time in a long while, felt a sense of belonging, a warmth that enveloped him amidst the lively chaos of the Bennet household. As the sun began to set, casting a soft glow over the estate, Darcy realized that this unexpected visit had opened a door to new possibilities. Perhaps, he mused, there was more to life than the rigid expectations of society. Perhaps, in the company of friends and the charm of Elizabeth, he could find a path to happiness he had never dared to imagine. As the weeks passed, Bingley and Darcy became regular guests at Longbourn, the presence of the latter igniting a whirlwind of conversations that danced between spirited debates and the occasional sharp retort. The drawing room, often filled with laughter and lively exchanges, also bore witness to misunderstandings that left both parties momentarily flustered. Yet amid the banter and the tension, a deeper connection began to form, particularly for Darcy. Initially, Elizabeth Bennet regarded Mr. Darcy with a mix of disdain and curiosity. His proud demeanor and aloofness had left a sour taste in her mouth, and she found herself unable to shake off the first impressions that painted him as insufferably arrogant. However, as they continued to meet, she noticed subtle changes in his behavior. The way he listened intently when she spoke, the flicker of admiration in his eyes when she challenged him, and the warmth that occasionally broke through his stoic exterior began to intrigue her. Darcy, for his part, was captivated by Elizabeth's wit and intelligence. Each encounter revealed layers of her character that he had previously overlooked. He admired her spirited nature, her ability to stand her ground, and the way she effortlessly commanded the attention of those around her. The more he learned about her, the more he realized that she was not just a suitable match, but a partner who could challenge him, inspire him, and ultimately complete him. Yet the path to understanding was fraught with obstacles. Elizabeth's initial prejudice against Darcy lingered like a shadow, and she often found herself torn between her growing curiosity and her ingrained judgments. She would catch herself stealing glances at him, wondering if there was more to the man behind the proud facade. But every time he spoke with a hint of condescension or withdrew into his shell, her resolve hardened. Chapter 3. One day, as Darcy and Bingley dismounted from their horses, the soft rustle of leaves accompanied the fervent prayers that echoed from within Longbourn. The sun cast a warm glow over the estate, but the atmosphere inside was thick with anxiety. The two gentlemen exchanged glances, their curiosity piqued by the earnestness of the Bennet family's supplications. Once inside, they were greeted by the sight of the Bennet sisters, their faces a mixture of worry and determination. Mr. Bennet, her hands clasped tightly, was leading the prayer, beseeching divine intervention for their financial plight. Bingley, ever the compassionate friend, approached her gently. "Dear Mr. Bennet, what troubles you so?" he inquired, his voice laced with concern. With a heavy sigh, Mr. Bennet explained the dire situation. "We have been unexpectedly called to repay a loan of £20,000, Mr. Bingley. It is a sum we cannot possibly gather in such a short time. If we fail, we risk losing our home." Darcy, who had remained silent until now, felt a stirring of empathy. He had always admired the Bennet family's resilience, particularly Elizabeth, who stood among her sisters, her brow furrowed in thought. The weight of their predicament seemed to hang in the air, palpable and pressing. "Surely there must be a way to resolve this," Darcy said, his mind racing with possibilities. "Perhaps I could assist in some manner." The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to him. Elizabeth, who had been listening intently, stepped forward. "Mr. Darcy, we appreciate your kindness, but we cannot accept charity. We must find a solution that preserves our dignity." In the dim light of the drawing room, Darcy stood before Mr. Bennet, his heart heavy with the weight of his proposal. The air was thick with tension, and the flickering candlelight cast shadows that danced across the walls, mirroring the turmoil in Darcy's mind. He had always been a man of action, yet here he was, hesitating, grappling with the delicate nature of his request. "Mr. Bennet," he began, his voice steady but laced with urgency, "I believe there is a way to assist your family during this difficult time." He paused, gauging the older man's expression. Mr. Bennet, with his usual air of indifference, raised an eyebrow, intrigued yet skeptical. Darcy took a breath, steeling himself. "If only Elizabeth would agree to marry me, it would not only secure her future, but also preserve the dignity of your family. I am in a position to offer her a life of comfort and respect, one that would alleviate the burdens you face." Mr. Bennet's gaze sharpened, his interest piqued. "And you think my daughter would accept such a proposal? She is not one to be easily swayed by wealth or status, Mr. Darcy." "I understand that," Darcy replied earnestly, "but I assure you my feelings for Elizabeth are genuine. I admire her spirit, her intelligence, and her unwavering principles. I would never wish to force her into a union she does not desire. But I believe that with time, she may come to see the merit in such an alliance." The older man leaned back in his chair, contemplating the implications of Darcy's words. "You speak of dignity and comfort, yet you must know that Elizabeth values love above all else. If she cannot love you, then what good is your offer?" Darcy nodded, acknowledging the truth in Mr. Bennet's statement. "I do not wish to undermine her feelings, sir. However, I believe that love can grow from respect and admiration. I am willing to give her the space to come to her own conclusions. to see that my intentions are honorable." Mr. Bennet sighed, the weight of his family's predicament pressing down on him. "You are a man of integrity, Mr. Darcy, and I appreciate your candor. But I cannot speak for Elizabeth. She is her own person, and I fear she may not see things as you do." "I am prepared to demonstrate my commitment," Darcy insisted, his resolve strengthening. "I will prove to her that I am worthy of her affection, that my intentions are sincere. If she can see the truth in my heart, perhaps she will consider my proposal." As the two men exchanged glances, a flicker of hope ignited in Darcy's chest. He understood the challenges ahead, but he was determined to win Elizabeth's heart, not just for the sake of her family's dignity, but for the love he felt blossoming within him. With Mr. Bennet's reluctant blessing, Darcy knew he had taken the first step toward a future that could unite them all. Chapter 4. However, Elizabeth was shocked and fled from the drawing room. Her heart raced with a mixture of fear and indignation. She could hear the muffled voices of Mr. Bennet and Mr. Darcy behind her, but their words were drowned out by the tumult in her mind. How could her father even consider this match? Mr. Darcy, with his lofty airs and disdainful gaze, was everything she despised. The thought of being bound to him, of living a life dictated by his pride and arrogance, sent shivers down her spine. She reached her bedchamber, slamming the door behind her, and leaned against it, her breath coming in quick bursts. The room was dimly lit, the heavy curtains drawn tight against the world outside. Elizabeth paced, her thoughts spiraling. She recalled their last encounter, the way he had looked at her, as if she were a puzzle he could not solve. There was a time when she had thought him insufferable, yet now she found herself grappling with an unexpected conflict. Was there more to Mr. Darcy than met the eye? But no! She shook her head vehemently. The very idea was ludicrous. He was a man of wealth and status, accustomed to getting his way, and she was merely a Bennet, a daughter of a gentleman with little fortune. The disparity between them was insurmountable. Suddenly, a soft knock interrupted her thoughts. It was Jane, her beloved sister, who entered with concern etched on her face. "Lizzie, you must speak with him. You cannot let this opportunity slip away." "Opportunity?" Elizabeth scoffed, her voice rising. "You mean a life of servitude to a man who sees me as nothing more than a means to elevate his own standing?" Jane stepped closer, her gentle demeanor unwavering. "But what if he truly cares for you, Lizzie? What if he is not the man you believe him to be?" Elizabeth paused, her heart softening at Jane's words. Could it be possible? She had heard whispers of Darcy's kindness, of his hidden depths. But the fear of being trapped in a loveless marriage loomed larger than any flicker of hope. "I cannot marry him, Jane. I will not," she declared, her resolve hardening. With that, Elizabeth wiped away the tears that had threatened to spill and squared her shoulders. She would fight for her own happiness, even if it meant standing against the formidable Mr. Darcy and the expectations of society. The path ahead was uncertain, but she was determined to carve her own destiny, one step at a time. In the dim light of the Bennet household, tension hung thick in the air. The absence of Elizabeth during lunch had been brushed off as a mere whim, a fleeting desire for solitude. But as the evening shadows lengthened and dinner time approached, a gnawing worry began to creep into the hearts of her family. Jane, ever the gentle soul, was the first to act. With a furrowed brow and a heart full of concern, she ascended the stairs to Elizabeth's room. The door creaked open, revealing an untouched bed and a hastily packed bag. Jane's breath caught in her throat as she realized the gravity of the situation. Elizabeth had left, taking with her not just clothes, but the very essence of her spirit, the books that inspired her, the letters that held her dreams, and the small trinkets that spoke of her past. When Jane returned to the dining room, her face was pale and her voice trembled as she relayed the news. "She's gone, Mama. Elizabeth has left us." The room fell silent, the clinking of silverware ceasing as shock settled over the family like a heavy fog. Mrs. Bennet, her eyes wide with disbelief, felt a surge of anger rise within her. "How could she do this?" she exclaimed, her voice rising in pitch. After everything we've endured, after all the plans we've made for her future, she's ruining our chance at redemption." Her words cut through the air, sharp and accusatory. "How dare she abandon us in our time of need? She has no regard for her family, for the sacrifices we've made." Mr. Bennet, usually the calm in the storm, looked at his wife with a mixture of disappointment and concern. "Elizabeth is not a child to be controlled, dear. She has her own mind, her own desires." But Mrs. Bennet, consumed by her own fears and frustrations, could not hear his reasoning. "She is selfish. All she thinks about is herself. What will the neighbors say? What will become of our family's reputation?" Mr. Bennet paced the dimly lit study, the flickering candlelight casting shadows on the walls. The weight of his daughter's absence pressed heavily upon him. Elizabeth, spirited and headstrong, had chosen to leave their home, seeking solace from the constraints of society and the expectations that came with it. Her departure had not only left a void in their household, but also stirred a tempest of worry within him. Determined to find her, Mr. Bennet resolved to enlist the help of a private detective. He knew that the world outside their estate was fraught with dangers, and Elizabeth, with her fierce independence, might not fully grasp the risks she faced. He needed someone skilled, someone who could navigate the undercurrents of society to locate her. The following day, Mr. Bennet met with a man named Mr. Hawthorne, a detective known for his discretion and keen intuition. As they sat across from each other in a small, quiet tavern, Mr. Bennet recounted the circumstances of Elizabeth's departure, his voice tinged with both concern and a hint of frustration. "Miss Bennet is not just any young lady," he explained. "She is headstrong and determined, and while I admire her spirit, I fear she may have underestimated the world beyond our estate." Mr. Hawthorne nodded, his expression serious. "I understand, sir. I will do my utmost to find her. But I must ask, where do you believe she might have gone?" Mr. Bennet thought for a moment. Elizabeth had often spoken of her desire to explore the countryside, to experience life beyond the confines of their home. "Perhaps she has gone to London, or even further." With a plan in place, Mr. Hawthorne set out the next morning, armed with a description of Elizabeth and a determination to bring her back safely. As Darcy paced the floor of his study, the flickering candlelight cast shadows that danced across the walls, mirroring the turmoil in his heart. Elizabeth Bennet, the spirited woman who had captured his thoughts and affections, had fled to escape a marriage that would have bound her to a man she did not love. The very idea of her alone in the world, vulnerable and unprotected, gnawed at him. His thoughts raced back to their last encounter, her fiery spirit igniting a passion within him that he had never known. How could he have let her slip away? He had been too proud, too restrained by his own expectations. Now, with every tick of the clock, he felt the weight of his inaction pressing down on him. "Dear God, let me find a way to take care of her, to find where she is," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. The thought of her wandering the streets of London, perhaps in danger, filled him with dread. He had to act, but how? The detective Mr. Bennet had engaged was known for his discretion and skill, yet the waiting was unbearable. Darcy's mind was a tempest of worry and regret. He recalled the stories of women who had gone missing, their fates sealed by the whims of fate and fortune. Elizabeth was not just another woman. She was intelligent, witty, and fiercely independent. But those very traits made her all the more vulnerable in a world that often took advantage of such independence. As the hours dragged on, Darcy found himself contemplating the nature of love and duty. He had always believed that love was a luxury, something to be pursued only when one's obligations were fulfilled. But now he questioned everything. Was it not his duty to protect the one he loved? Just as despair began to settle in, a knock at the door startled him from his thoughts. It was Bingley, his closest friend, who entered with a look of concern etched on his face. "Darcy, I've heard the news. Is it true? Elizabeth has run away?" "Yes," Darcy replied, his voice heavy with emotion. "I fear for her safety. I cannot sit idly by while she is out there alone." Chapter 5. Elizabeth Bennet sat on a bench in a bustling London station, the echoes of train whistles and the chatter of travelers swirling around her like a tempest. She had traveled as far as her meager savings would allow, her heart racing with uncertainty about her next steps. The post-carriage had jolted her into a new world, far removed from the familiar comforts of Longbourn. She glanced around, her keen eyes taking in the throngs of people, each with their own stories and destinations. Yet she felt like a ghost, invisible amidst the vibrant life surrounding her. The thought of seeking refuge with her aunt and Uncle Gardner crossed her mind, but she quickly dismissed it. The Gardners were kind, but they would inevitably alert her family, and that was the last thing she wanted. With a deep breath, Elizabeth focused on her immediate predicament. She had to find work, something to sustain herself in this vast city. Her mind raced through the possibilities. She had always been a quick learner, adept at managing the household at Longbourn. But would that be enough to secure a position in London? In the bustling heart of London, the station was alive with the sounds of trains arriving and departing, the chatter of travelers, and the occasional shout of a vendor. Amidst this vibrant chaos, Elizabeth Bennet stood, her mind swirling with thoughts of her family and the uncertain future that lay ahead. It was then that she encountered a young man whose charm was as striking as his appearance. "Good day to you, miss," he said, his voice smooth and inviting. "I am Mr. George Wickham." Elizabeth, intrigued by his demeanor, returned his greeting with a polite smile. "And what brings you to this station, Mr. Wickham?" "I find myself in search of opportunities, much like yourself, I presume," he replied, his eyes sparkling with a hint of mischief. "In fact, I may have a proposition for you. My friend is in need of assistance and employs several young ladies. I believe you would find the work quite agreeable." Elizabeth raised an eyebrow, curiosity piqued. "What sort of work do you speak of?" Wickham leaned in slightly, lowering his voice as if sharing a delightful secret. "Ah, it is of a nature that is both engaging and pleasant. You would be assisting in various affairs, ensuring that our clientele is well cared for. I assure you, it is a position that many find quite enjoyable." Though his words were enticing, Elizabeth felt a flicker of caution. She had heard whispers of men who offered opportunities that were too good to be true. Yet there was something about Wickham, his easy smile, the way he carried himself, that made her hesitate. "Very well," she said, her resolve strengthening. "I shall accompany you to meet your friend." As they walked through the thrumming streets of London, Wickham spoke animatedly about the city, painting a picture of its wonders and the people who thrived within it. Elizabeth listened intently, captivated not only by his words, but by the charm he exuded. However, a small voice in the back of her mind reminded her to remain vigilant. Elizabeth's heart raced as she stood before the imposing structure, its darkened windows and peeling paint whispering secrets of despair. The air was thick with an unsettling tension, and a chill ran down her spine. "Wickham, this can't be right," she protested, her voice trembling with a mix of fear and anger. "This place, it's a brothel. I will never work here." Wickham, with his disarming smile that once charmed her, now seemed like a predator reveling in his conquest. He stepped closer, his presence suffocating. "Oh, Lizzie," he said, his tone mocking, "you really should learn to accept your fate. It's too late to turn back now." With a swift motion, he grabbed her arm, his grip firm and unyielding. Elizabeth struggled against him, her heart pounding as she fought to break free. "Let me go! You can't do this!" she cried, desperation lacing her words. But Wickham only tightened his hold, dragging her toward the entrance. As they crossed the threshold, the dim light of the interior revealed a scene that made Elizabeth's stomach churn. Women lounged about, their eyes hollow and resigned, while the air was thick with the scent of stale perfume and regret. It was a world she had only heard of in hushed whispers, a place where dreams went to die. "Welcome to your new home," Wickham sneered, pushing her further inside. Elizabeth's mind raced, searching for a way out, a glimmer of hope in this nightmare. She had always prided herself on her strength, her ability to stand firm against adversity, But now, faced with the grim reality of her situation, doubt began to creep in. "Please, Wickham," she pleaded, her voice breaking. "I don't belong here. I want to leave." He paused for a moment, his expression shifting from amusement to something colder. "You think you have a choice? This is your life now, Elizabeth. Embrace it or suffer the consequences." Tears streamed down her cheeks as she realized the depth of his betrayal. The man she trusted had led her into this hell, and now she was trapped. Chapter 6. Elizabeth's heart raced as she was forced to enter the dimly lit room, the air thick with an unsettling tension. The footman, a silent sentinel, gestured for them to proceed, but Wickham's attention was fixed on Elizabeth. With a firm grip on her arm, he urged her forward, a smirk playing on his lips. The man seated at the desk was a figure of disrepute, his presence oozing a sense of menace. He leaned back in his chair, a grotesque grin stretching across his face, revealing teeth that seemed to glint in the low light. "Ah, Wickham, you brought me a delightful little prize," he crooned, his voice dripping with insincerity. "I trust our customers will find her quite satisfactory." Elizabeth's pulse quickened as she took in the scene, her instincts screaming at her to flee. Wickham, however, appeared unfazed, basking in the man's approval. "Indeed, Mr. Lynn, she's a rare find," he replied, his tone smooth and calculated. "I thought she might be just what you're looking for." "Excellent," Mr. Lynn exclaimed, leaning forward, his eyes narrowing with interest. "A fresh face always brings in more business." "Tell me, my dear," he said, turning his gaze to Elizabeth, "are you ready to make a name for yourself?" Elizabeth's stomach churned at the implication of his words. She felt trapped, caught in a web of Wickham's deceit and this man's predatory gaze. She stammered, searching for words that could extricate her from this nightmare. "I am not what?" Wickham interrupted, his voice suddenly cold. "Not ready or not willing?" His eyes bore into hers, a silent threat lurking beneath the surface. Mr. Lynn chuckled, a low, sinister sound that sent shivers down her spine. "Oh, don't be coy, my dear. You'll find that the world is much more accommodating when you embrace your role." He leaned back again, a satisfied glint in his eye. "Wickham, you've done well. I'll take her under my wing." Elizabeth's heart sank as she realized the gravity of her situation. She was no more than a pawn in their twisted game, a mere object to be traded and used. In the dimly lit room of Mr. Lynn's establishment, tension hung thick in the air. Wickham, with his charming smile that masked a heart of deceit, listened intently as Mr. Lynn spoke of a new opportunity that could yield even greater profits than the brothel itself. The idea of selling young women to ships as companions for sailors was as repugnant as it was lucrative, and Wickham's interest piqued. "Imagine, Wickham," Mr. Lynn said, his voice low and conspiratorial. "The sailors are always in need of companionship during their long voyages. We could provide them with what they desire, and in return, we would reap the rewards." As he spoke, Wickham's mind raced with possibilities. The thought of exploiting vulnerable women for profit was not new to him, but this venture promised a level of wealth that could elevate him beyond his current station. He nodded, feigning enthusiasm, while inwardly calculating the risks and rewards. "In fact," Mr. Lynn informed, "I just have a visitor searching for such opportunities." "Bring him in," Mr. Lynn commanded, gesturing to the footman. "Let us hear what he has to offer." Meanwhile, Elizabeth Bennet, unaware of the sinister plans unfolding around her, found herself thrust into a small closet. The door slammed shut, and the sound of the lock clicking into place echoed in her ears. Panic surged through her as she pressed her back against the cold wooden wall, her heart racing. She had heard snippets of conversation, enough to know that her fate was being decided by men who viewed her as nothing more than a commodity. Time stretched on as she waited in the darkness, the muffled voices of Mr. Lynn, Wickham, and the third man filtering through the door. She could hear their laughter, their casual discussions about her worth, and the thought made her stomach churn. Elizabeth had always prided herself on her independence and spirit, but now she felt trapped. both physically and emotionally. In the dim light of the closet, Elizabeth huddled against the wall, her heart racing as she pressed her back against the cold, hard surface. The muffled sounds of laughter and shouts from the men next door seeped through the thin walls, each echo sending chills down her spine. She had heard their plans, their sinister intentions, and the weight of despair settled heavily upon her shoulders. With trembling hands, she clasped them together, closing her eyes tightly as tears streamed down her cheeks. "God, please," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the cacophony outside. "I can't bear this. I need you now more than ever. Save me from this horrible fate." Her thoughts raced, memories of happier times flooding her mind. Days spent in the sun, laughter shared with friends, the warmth of love that once enveloped her. But now darkness loomed, threatening to swallow her whole. She felt utterly alone, trapped in a nightmare from which she could not awaken. "Please, I'm begging you," she cried out, her voice breaking. "I don't want to be a victim. I want to live. I want to be free." The desperation in her heart poured out in her prayers, each word a plea for salvation. She could almost feel the weight of her fears pressing down on her, suffocating her spirit. As she sat there in that small, dark space, Elizabeth found a flicker of hope. "I trust in you, God," she murmured, her faith a fragile thread that held her together. "I believe you can protect me." Suddenly a loud crash echoed from the other side of the door, followed by a series of shouts. Elizabeth's heart raced even faster, but she clung to her prayer, her spirit igniting with a newfound resolve. "I will not let fear consume me," she declared softly, her voice steadying. In that moment, she felt a warmth envelop her, a sense of peace that calmed her racing heart. It was as if God had wrapped her in a protective embrace, whispering promises of safety and strength. Chapter 7. Elizabeth pressed her back against the cold wall of her closet, her heart racing as the muffled voices outside grew increasingly hostile. The dim light filtering through the slats of the closet door cast eerie shadows around her, amplifying her sense of dread. She could hear the men arguing, their tones sharp and accusatory, each word laced with tension. "She's mine! You can't take her!" one voice shouted, filled with a mix of anger and desperation. Elizabeth's breath caught in her throat as she recognized the urgency in his tone. "Enough! If we don't settle this now, we might lose her for good," another voice countered, the sound of fists hitting flesh echoing through the air. It was a brutal reminder of the stakes at play, and Elizabeth felt a chill run down her spine. She strained to listen, trying to piece together the fragments of their conversation. Who were these men? Why were they fighting over her? The questions swirled in her mind, but the fear of the unknown was suffocating. Suddenly, the door to her room rattled violently as one of the men attempted to unlock it. "I will take her!" he yelled, his voice filled with a mix of rage and desperation, but he was drawn back by other two men. Elizabeth's heart raced as she pressed her palms against her ears, trying to block out the chaos. As the chaos unfolded outside Elizabeth's closet, the sound of shattering glass and splintering wood echoed through the dimly lit room. She pressed her back against the cold wooden wall, heart racing, as she tried to make sense of the turmoil. The muffled shouts of the men grew louder, their anger palpable, each word a reminder of the danger that lurked just beyond her sanctuary. "Get off me!" one of the men roared, followed by a heavy thud that made Elizabeth flinch. She could almost picture the scene, 3 figures grappling, fists flying, desperation fueling their every move. The air was thick with tension, and the scent of sweat and fear mingled in the confined space. Elizabeth had never been a witness to such violence, but just as quickly as it had escalated, the commotion outside fell eerily silent. Elizabeth held her breath, straining to hear any sign of movement. The silence was deafening, and she felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. As Elizabeth stepped out of the closet, her heart raced with a mix of fear and exhilaration. The dim light of the room cast eerie shadows over the 3 men sprawled on the floor, their bodies a testament to the chaos that had unfolded moments before. She had heard the commotion from her hiding place, the shouts and the sounds of struggle echoing in her ears, each noise a reminder of the danger that had surrounded her. With cautious steps, she maneuvered around the unconscious figures, her breath held tight in her chest. The air outside the closet felt different, fresher, almost electric. Each step she took felt like a small victory, a reclaiming of her autonomy. The brothel, with its sordid reputation and dark corners, had held her captive for too long, and now, as she slipped through the door, she could almost taste the freedom that awaited her. The cool night air hit her like a wave, invigorating and liberating. Elizabeth paused for a moment, allowing herself to breathe deeply, savoring the scent of the world outside, the distant sound of laughter, the rustling of leaves, and the twinkling stars above. It was a stark contrast to the oppressive atmosphere she had just escaped. With newfound determination, she quickened her pace, leaving the brothel behind. Each step away from that place felt like shedding a heavy cloak, the weight of her past lifting with every stride. As she reached the edge of the street, Elizabeth glanced back one last time. The brothel loomed in the distance, a dark silhouette against the moonlit sky. But it was just that, a silhouette, a memory she was ready to leave behind. With a smile breaking across her face, she turned her back on the past and walked into the night, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. Freedom was no longer just a distant dream. It was her reality, and she was determined to make the most of it. As the moon hung high in the London sky, casting a silvery glow over the cobblestone streets, Elizabeth took a moment to catch her breath. The adrenaline from her narrow escape still coursed through her veins, and she could hear the distant echoes of her pursuers fading into the night. For now she was free, but the reality of her situation quickly settled in. The streets of London, though bustling by day, transformed into a labyrinth of shadows by night. Elizabeth had always been warned about the dangers that lurked after dark, especially for a woman alone. She wrapped her shawl tighter around her shoulders, feeling the chill of the evening air seep into her bones. The thrill of freedom was quickly overshadowed by the gnawing fear of what lay ahead. With no destination in mind, she wandered through the winding alleyways, her heart pounding with every step. The flickering gas lamps illuminated her path sporadically, creating an eerie dance of light and shadow. She needed to find shelter, a safe haven where she could gather her thoughts and plan her next move. When she saw a carriage in front of a smaller house, with two ladies stepping out, Elizabeth felt a flicker of hope. The older woman, with her silver hair neatly pinned up and a kind smile, glanced around as if sensing Elizabeth's unease. The younger lady, dressed in a vibrant blue gown, looked at Elizabeth with curiosity. "Are you all right, dear?" the elderly woman asked, her voice warm and inviting. Elizabeth hesitated, her heart racing from the recent escape. She had no idea who these women were, but the kindness in their eyes was a balm to her frayed nerves. I'm fine, thank you," she replied, though her voice trembled slightly. The younger lady stepped closer, her expression shifting to one of concern. "You don't look fine. You seem lost. Please, come inside. It's not safe to be out here alone." Elizabeth glanced back down the street, the shadows of the night creeping closer. She weighed her options. The thought of returning to the danger she had just fled made her stomach churn. With a deep breath, she nodded. "I would appreciate that." The elderly woman smiled and gestured for Elizabeth to follow them into the house. As they entered, Elizabeth was enveloped by the warmth of the cozy interior. The flickering candlelight danced on the walls, casting a welcoming glow. "Welcome to our home," the older lady said, her voice soothing. "I am Mrs. Gordon, and this is my niece, Mrs. Annesley. We were just returning from an evening gathering." "Thank you for your kindness," Elizabeth said, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over her. "I'm Elizabeth." "Elizabeth, what a lovely name," Mrs. Annesley said, her eyes sparkling with interest. "What brings you out at this hour?" Elizabeth hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. I had a bit of trouble and needed to escape. I didn't know where else to go." Mrs. Gordon's expression softened. "You are safe here, dear. We will help you. You can stay with me until you find your footing. My niece must return to work. She is a companion of a rich young lady. so I would really like to have some help from you in the coming days." As Elizabeth settled into her home, she felt a sense of relief wash over her. The warmth of her hospitality wrapped around her like a comforting blanket. She shared her story, and the lady listened intently, offering words of encouragement and support. Chapter 8. As the sun dipped low in the sky, casting a golden hue over Netherfield Park, Mr. Darcy stood at the grand entrance, his heart fluttering with anticipation. The arrival of his sister, Georgiana, always brought a sense of warmth and joy to the otherwise stately abode. Today, however, there was an added excitement in the air, for she had traveled from London with a companion, a woman whose presence promised to be both intriguing and refreshing. As the carriage wheels crunched over the gravel, Darcy straightened his waistcoat, a habit he had developed in moments of nervousness. The door swung open, and Georgiana stepped out, her face alight with happiness. She rushed forward to embrace him, her laughter ringing like music in the crisp evening air. "Darcy, it is so wonderful to be here again," she exclaimed, her eyes sparkling. "My companion has the most fascinating tale to tell." Darcy turned his gaze to Georgiana's companion, stepping gracefully from the carriage. "Welcome to Netherfield Park, Mrs. Annesley," he said, offering a polite bow. "I trust your journey was pleasant." "Oh, it was quite the adventure, Mr. Darcy," she replied, her eyes twinkling with amusement. "But I believe it is my story that will truly captivate you." Intrigued, Darcy gestured for them to enter the drawing room, where a fire crackled invitingly. As they settled into plush chairs, Darcy's eyes gleamed with anticipation, eager to hear the lady's tale. "Pray, do tell," Darcy encouraged, leaning forward slightly, his interest piqued. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden hue over the countryside, Fitzwilliam Darcy sat in the quiet of his study, the weight of his thoughts pressing heavily upon him. The news of Elizabeth Bennet's location had reached him like a thunderclap, igniting a storm of emotions within him. He had heard whispers of her flight from Longbourn, driven by a desire for freedom. But now she was safe. Darcy had always admired Elizabeth's spirit, her fierce independence that set her apart from the society that sought to confine her. But now, as he contemplated the implications of her absence, he felt a profound sense of responsibility. He knew where she was, safely ensconced in the company of Mrs. Gordon in London. The urge to ride to Longbourn and reveal her whereabouts to her family surged within him, a desire to restore order and bring Elizabeth back to the safety of her home. Yet, as he paced the room, a still small voice whispered to him, urging caution. He closed his eyes, seeking guidance in prayer. "What is the right course, dear God?" he implored. "Should I intervene or allow her the space she needs?" The answer came not in words, but in a profound sense of clarity. Elizabeth had chosen to leave for a reason. To reveal her location would be to impose his will upon her, to strip her of the very autonomy she sought. With a heavy heart, Darcy made his decision. He would not betray her trust. Instead, he would respect her choice, even if it meant enduring the anguish of knowing she was away from her family. He believed that true love was not about possession, but about understanding and supporting the other's desires, even when they diverged from one's own wishes. The sun hung low in the sky over Longbourn, casting long shadows across the fields as Detective Hawthorne made his way to the Bennet residence. The week had dragged on, each day filled with worry and uncertainty for the Bennet family, especially for Jane, who had been inconsolable since Elizabeth's mysterious disappearance. As he approached the door, the air was thick with anticipation. Mrs. Bennet, her hands wringing nervously in her apron, opened the door, her eyes wide with hope. "Detective Hawthorne, have you news of my Lizzie?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Yes, ma'am," he replied, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from his pocket. "We have located her." The room fell silent, the weight of his words hanging in the air. He unfolded the paper to reveal a sketched likeness of Elizabeth, her features captured with a delicate precision that made her seem almost alive. "I have been asking around, showing this image to anyone who might recognize her. I encountered a man, Mr. Wickham, who, after some persuasion, revealed he had seen her. "What did he say?" Jane asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "After some convincing," Hawthorne continued, "he admitted that he last saw Miss Bennet in a certain part of London. I spied on those streets for several days, and in the end, I was able to see her with an elderly lady entering a smaller house in that area. Mr. Bennet, I recommend that you join me tomorrow to retrieve her from there." As dawn broke over the sleepy village of Longbourn, Mr. Bennet's heart raced with a mix of anxiety and determination. The previous evening, he had sent a message to Mr. Darcy, revealing him that Elizabet, his beloved daughter, had been located in London. With a sense of urgency, Mr. Bennet gathered his coat and hat, preparing for the journey ahead. The detective awaited him at the door. Together they set off, the carriage rattling along the cobbled roads as the sun began to rise, casting a golden hue over the landscape. As they traveled, Mr. Bennet's thoughts were consumed with worry. Elizabeth had always been headstrong and independent, traits he cherished, yet they had led her into a precarious situation. He recalled the last time he had seen her, and the way her eyes sparkled with passion. He hoped she was safe and that she had not lost her indomitable spirit. Chapter 9. Elizabeth sat in the dimly lit living room of Mrs. Gordon's house, her heart racing as she read the urgent message for the third time. The words blurred together, but the meaning was crystal clear. Her location had been discovered. Panic surged through her veins. She had spent weeks hiding, trying to escape the suffocating expectations of her family. And now it seemed her sanctuary was at risk. The note instructed her to act immediately, to follow the directions on the last page without hesitation. The sender, simply labeled as a friend, offered no further details, leaving her with a mix of hope and dread. Elizabeth had always been cautious, but the thought of being found by her family was unbearable. They would never understand her need for freedom, her desire to carve her own path. She had to make a choice: stay and face them, or continue her escape. As Elizabeth sat in her small, sunlit room, feeling the weight of the importance of her pending decision, Mrs. Gordon had appeared like a beacon of hope, offering her a devotional book that had been a source of strength in her own life. With trembling hands, Elizabeth opened the book, its pages worn and filled with wisdom. The title, Desperation, caught her eye, and she felt a flicker of recognition. The instructions within spoke directly to her soul, urging her to pour out her pain before God, to lay bare her fears and sorrows in a sacred act of vulnerability. "Trust in Him at all times, you people. Pour out your hearts to Him, for God is our refuge." Ps. 62:9. I have been praying here out of my great anguish and grief. Go in peace, and may the God of Israel grant you what you have asked of Him. 1 Sam 1:16-17. As she read, Elizabeth recalled the moment she had escaped the clutches of those men. It had been a desperate act, fueled by a primal instinct to survive. In that moment of fear, she had turned to prayer, her heart crying out for help. It was as if the words in the book were echoing her own thoughts, guiding her to understand that her cries had not gone unheard. With each word she absorbed, Elizabeth felt a sense of release. The book instructed her to acknowledge her pain, to embrace it as part of her journey. She began to write in the margins, her thoughts spilling onto the pages like a river of emotion. I felt so alone, she wrote, but I know now that I am not. God was with me, even in my darkest hour. The sun dipped lower in the sky, casting a warm glow across her room. Elizabeth closed her eyes, allowing the words of the book to wash over her. She envisioned herself standing before God, pouring out her heart, unburdening herself of the weight she had carried for too long. In that moment, she felt a profound sense of peace envelop her, as if the very act of sharing her pain had lifted a heavy veil from her spirit. Mrs. Gordon's gift was more than just a book, it was a lifeline. Elizabeth realized that she was not defined by her struggles, but rather by her resilience. The devotional book would become her companion, a source of comfort and guidance as she navigated the complexities of her emotions. Elizabeth sat in her cozy corner, the soft glow of the lamp illuminating the pages of the devotional book she had been reading. The title Happiness caught her eye, and as she delved into the text, a warmth spread through her heart. The words spoke of a profound truth. The greatest happiness lies in being near to God. In addition to that, it was the idea that resonated most deeply with her, that in making others happy, we find our own joy. It is more blessed to give than to receive, the passage declared, echoing in her mind. But as for me, it is good to be near God. I have made the sovereign Lord my refuge. I will tell of all your deeds. Psalm 73:28. In everything I did, I showed you that by this kind of hard work, we must help the weak, remembering the words the Lord Jesus himself said, "It is more blessed to give than to receive." Acts 20:35. As she pondered these words, Elizabeth felt a stirring within her. She had been away from home for some time, fleeing the imaginary dreads that had pulled her away from the people she loved. The thought of returning home to ease the distress of her family filled her with a sense of purpose. But it was quickly met with a wave of doubt. Wouldn't returning mean sacrificing her own needs and desires? Elizabeth took a deep breath, reminding herself that happiness is not a zero-sum game. She recalled moments from her past when she had given of herself, volunteering at the local shelter, helping a friend in need, or simply being present for someone going through a tough time. Each act of kindness had filled her with a sense of fulfillment that was unmatched. Perhaps, she mused, there was a way to balance her own needs with the joy of giving. A sense of peace washed over her. Elizabeth understood that true happiness was not about choosing between her needs and the needs of others. It was about embracing both. In the end, Elizabeth decided to return home, not as a sacrifice, but because of love. Happiness, she learned, was not a solitary pursuit, but a shared journey, and in giving, she would find her own heart's joy blossoming anew. As Elizabeth Bennet sat in the quiet of her room, the soft light of the afternoon sun filtering through the lace curtains, her thoughts drifted to Mr. Darcy. She had spent countless hours dismissing him, convinced that his aloof demeanor masked a heart devoid of warmth. The memory of Mr. Darcy's unexpected offer to assist her family during their time of distress lingered in her thoughts. It was a gesture that spoke volumes, revealing a side of him she had never bothered to consider. Perhaps her initial contempt had been clouded by her own prejudices and misunderstandings. After all, he had not only offered financial support, but had done so with a sincerity that left her momentarily speechless. As she pondered this, Elizabeth recalled their last conversation. His eyes had held a depth of emotion she had never noticed before, a flicker of vulnerability that made her heart ache with a strange mix of regret and curiosity. Could it be that beneath his reserved exterior lay a man capable of kindness and affection? The thought was both unsettling and intriguing. She had always prided herself on her ability to judge character, yet here she was, questioning her own judgments. Perhaps, she whispered to herself, it is time to reconsider. The idea of a life shared with Mr. Darcy, a man who could be generous and caring, began to take root in her imagination. What if he could be the partner she had never dared to dream of? A man who would stand by her side, not just in times of joy, but also in hardship. With newfound resolve, Elizabeth decided that she would not shy away from the truth any longer. It was time to confront her feelings and allow herself the chance to explore this unexpected connection. After all, love often blossomed in the most unlikely of places, and perhaps Mr. Darcy was not the man she had once thought him to be. As she turned away from the window, a small smile played upon her lips. The journey ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope. Maybe, just maybe, being married to Mr. Darcy wouldn't be so bad after all, and at least it would bring financial relief for her family that they desperately needed. Chapter 10. As the carriage rolled to a halt outside the grand residence of Mrs. Gordon, Mr. Bennet adjusted his spectacles and peered out, his brow furrowing in surprise. There, on the elegant staircase leading to the entrance, stood Elizabeth, her figure poised yet tinged with an air of defiance. The detective beside him, a man of keen observation, noted the flicker of confusion in Mr. Bennet's eyes. Why is she not inside? Mr. Bennet murmured, more to himself than to the detective. If she wished to remain away from home, why not seek refuge within? The detective, accustomed to the complexities of human behavior, offered a knowing nod. Perhaps she is waiting for you, sir. Or perhaps she seeks to confront the matter head-on. Mr. Bennet stepped down from the carriage, his heart a tumult of emotions. Elizabeth had always been spirited, but this was different. The way she stood there, resolute and unyielding, suggested a determination that he had not seen before. As he approached, he noticed the slight tremor in her hands, betraying the calm facade she wore. "Elizabeth," he called softly, his voice laced with concern. "What are you doing here? Why are you waiting for us outside like this?" She met his gaze, her eyes sparkling with a mixture of defiance and vulnerability. "I could not hide, Papa, not when I knew you were coming." Mr. Bennet studied her, recognizing the strength in her words. Elizabeth had always been a force of nature, and now, more than ever, she embodied the spirit of a woman ready to forge her own path. "Very well," he said finally, a hint of pride swelling within him. "Then let us face whatever awaits together." As the carriage rolled smoothly along the familiar path back to Longbourn, Elizabeth Bennet gazed out of the window, her thoughts swirling like the autumn leaves that danced in the crisp air. The decision she had made weighed heavily on her heart, yet it filled her with a newfound strength. No longer would she shy away from the challenges that life presented. She would confront them head-on, for to do otherwise would mean a life spent in perpetual flight. Mr. Bennet, seated beside her, glanced over with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "My dear Lizzie," he began, his voice steady yet gentle, "what has brought about this sudden resolve?" Elizabeth turned to him, her eyes bright with determination. "Father, I have come to realize that evading our troubles only prolongs our suffering. I cannot live in fear of what may come. Instead, I must embrace the uncertainties and learn from them. It is time for me to face my own destiny." Mr. Bennet nodded, a hint of pride swelling within him. He admired his daughter's fierce spirit, a trait that often set her apart from her more docile sisters. "You speak wisely, Lizzie. Life is indeed a series of trials, and it is through facing them that we grow stronger." The carriage continued its journey, the rhythmic clatter of hooves on the cobblestones providing a comforting backdrop to their conversation. Mr. Bennet considered her words carefully. "You are wise beyond your years, Elizabeth. Just remember, facing difficulties does not mean you must do so in isolation. You have family and friends who care for you deeply." Elizabeth smiled, grateful for her father's support. "I know, and I am thankful for it, but I must also learn to rely on myself. I cannot expect others to fight my battles for me." As they approached Longbourn, the sun dipped low on the horizon, casting a golden hue over the estate. Elizabeth felt a sense of peace wash over her. She was ready to confront whatever lay ahead, armed with the knowledge that she was not alone in her journey. With her father's unwavering belief in her, she felt emboldened to face her fate with courage and grace. The carriage came to a halt, and as they stepped out, Elizabeth took a deep breath, ready to embrace the challenges that awaited her. She had chosen to face her life, not flee from it, and in that choice she found her true self. Chapter 11. As Elizabeth entered her home, the familiar scent of lavender wafted through the air, a comforting reminder of her mother's diligent care. However, the warmth of her surroundings was quickly overshadowed by her mother's unexpected news. "Elizabeth, Mr. Darcy has withdrawn his requirement for marriage," her mother exclaimed, her voice a mixture of excitement and disbelief. Elizabeth stood frozen at the threshold, her heart racing. The words echoed in her mind, each syllable striking her like a sudden gust of wind. "Withdrawn?" she repeated, her voice barely above a whisper. The notion felt surreal, as if she were caught in a dream from which she could not awaken. "Indeed, he must have reconsidered his feelings," her mother continued, her eyes sparkling with hope. "You must be overjoyed." But joy was the last emotion Elizabeth felt. Instead, a whirlwind of thoughts consumed her. Am I not worthy enough for him? She pondered, her mind racing back to their previous encounters. Mr. Darcy, with his proud demeanor and piercing gaze, had always seemed so distant, yet there was a flicker of something deeper beneath the surface. Had she misread his intentions? Elizabeth ran to her own room, locked the door, and sank into a chair, her hands trembling slightly. The room felt stifling, the walls closing in around her. She recalled their last conversation, the way he had looked at her, as if she were both a treasure and a puzzle he could not solve. What did I do wrong? She mused, her heart heavy with uncertainty. Her mother, oblivious to Elizabeth's turmoil, continued to chatter about the possibilities of other suitors, her voice a distant hum in Elizabeth's ears. All she could think about was the man who had once stirred something within her, a blend of admiration and irritation. The thought of him withdrawing his affections left her feeling hollow. Elizabeth Bennet sat alone in the dim light of her favorite reading nook, a heavy tome resting unopened on her lap. The shadows danced across the walls, echoing the turmoil in her heart. She had always prided herself on her independence and resilience, yet today those qualities felt like burdens rather than strengths. Why is it always me? She whispered to the empty room, her voice barely above a sigh. It seemed that every time she turned around, there was another challenge waiting for her. Whether it was the incessant pressures from her family to marry well, the societal expectations that loomed over her like a dark cloud, or the heartache that came with unrequited love, Elizabeth felt as though she was constantly sacrificing her own happiness for the sake of others. Her thoughts drifted to Mr. Darcy, the enigmatic man who had once professed his love for her in a moment of vulnerability. The memory of his proud demeanor and the way he had looked down upon her family haunted her. Perhaps my assumption is right, she mused bitterly. Perhaps I am not worthy of his love. The notion stung, igniting a flicker of anger within her. Elizabeth had always believed in her own worth, yet the weight of societal judgment pressed heavily on her shoulders. Elizabeth sat on the edge of her bed, the morning sun filtering through the curtains, casting a warm glow across her room. Her fingers brushed over the worn cover of her devotional book, a cherished companion through the tumultuous journey of her life. Today she felt an inexplicable pull to open it, as if the pages held answers she desperately sought. As she flipped through the familiar pages, her eyes landed on the title, Freedom. A sense of anticipation washed over her. The words beneath it promised that when she found the truth, that truth would set her free. Elizabeth's heart raced. Freedom was something she yearned for, but had always felt just out of reach. Then you will know the truth, and the truth will set you free. John 8:32. The text continued, delving into the complexities of the human experience. It spoke of arrogance, vanity, and self-pity, attitudes she had clung to during moments of despair. Each word resonated deeply within her, illuminating the shadows of her past. She realized that these were manifestations of believing in self-generated lies, a cycle that had kept her trapped in a prison of her own making. With each line she read, Elizabeth felt a growing sense of clarity. The book urged her to reject these toxic attitudes and to accept the uncomfortable truths she had long avoided. It was a daunting prospect, yet the promise of real freedom beckoned her. She envisioned a life unburdened by the weight of her insecurities, a life where she could embrace her authentic self. As she closed her eyes, Elizabeth took a deep breath, allowing the words to sink in. The truth might be objectionable, it might challenge her very identity, but she knew that clinging to it was the only way to break free from the chains that had held her captive for so long. With newfound determination, she resolved to embark on this journey of self-discovery. Each day would be a step towards embracing the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it felt. She would confront her arrogance, dismantle her vanity, and let go of self-pity. In doing so, she would uncover the freedom that had always been hers to claim. Elizabeth opened her eyes, a smile breaking across her face. The road ahead would not be easy, but she felt a flicker of hope igniting within her. She was ready to seek the truth, to embrace the freedom that awaited her, and to finally live a life unshackled by the lies she had once believed. Chapter 12. Elizabeth's musings were interrupted by a knock at her door. She recognized the voice of Mr. Darcy, asking her if they could speak. But when she did not react immediately, she saw a note pushed through the slit of her door. Curiosity piqued, Elizabeth bent down to retrieve the note. The paper was neatly folded, and her heart raced as she unfolded it, revealing Mr. Darcy's elegant handwriting. A flutter of surprise coursed through her, for she recognized the handwriting to be the same that had sent her a letter to warn her about her discovery in London. "Dearest Miss Bennet," it began, "I understand that my previous visits may have caused you some distress, and for that I sincerely apologize. However, there are matters of great importance that I must discuss with you." Elizabeth's mind raced. What could be so urgent? She glanced at the door, contemplating whether to let him in or dismiss him entirely. The memory of their last encounter, filled with misunderstandings and unspoken words, flooded her thoughts. With a deep breath, she opened the door, finding Mr. Darcy standing there, his expression a mix of determination and vulnerability. "Miss Bennet," he said, his voice steady yet soft, "thank you for allowing me to speak with you." "Of course, Mr. Darcy," she replied, her heart pounding. "What is it that you wish to discuss?" Before Mr. Darcy could answer, Elizabeth blurted out, "Why did you withdraw your requirement of marriage? Am I not worthy enough for you?" The air between them crackled with tension, and the soft glow of the evening sun filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Darcy's brow furrowed, and for a moment he seemed lost in thought. The weight of her question hung heavily in the air, and he could feel the intensity of her gaze piercing through him. "Elizabeth," he began, his voice low and earnest, "it is not a matter of worthiness. It never was." "Then what is it?" Elizabeth pressed, her heart racing. "Have you found out that you do not love me at all?" Mr. Darcy stood before Elizabeth Bennet, his heart a tumultuous sea of emotions. The sun cast a warm glow through the tall windows, illuminating the room with a golden hue, but it did little to ease the tension that hung between them. "Elizabeth," he began, his voice steady yet filled with vulnerability, "I love you more than anything in this world." He paused, searching her eyes for a flicker of hope. "To have you as my wife would bring me immeasurable joy, yet I cannot bring myself to force you into a union that you do not desire. That would only lead to your unhappiness, and I could never bear the thought of causing you pain." Elizabeth's heart raced at his confession. She had once believed him proud and unyielding, but in this moment she saw a man who was deeply aware of the complexities of love and choice. "Mr. Darcy," she replied softly, "your love is a treasure, but I must be honest with you. My feelings have been tumultuous, shaped by misunderstandings and my own prejudices." He stepped closer, his gaze unwavering. "I understand, and I do not wish to pressure you. I only wish for you to know the depth of my affection. If you cannot return it, I will respect your wishes, no matter how it pains me." Elizabeth's heart raced as she processed Mr. Darcy's words. The weight of her family's financial struggles had always loomed over her, a shadow that darkened her thoughts and decisions. Now, faced with the reality of her situation, the question felt more pressing than ever. "What about the finances of my family?" she asked. "If I do not marry you, who takes care of that?" "It has already been taken care of," he answered. However, the requirement of the marriage had been excluded from that agreement. "Taken care of?" she echoed, her voice barely above a whisper. "What do you mean?" Mr. Darcy's gaze softened, and for a moment she saw the man beneath the proud exterior. "Your family's debts have been settled, Elizabeth. I could not stand by while you and your loved ones suffered due to circumstances beyond your control." A mix of gratitude and confusion swirled within her. "But why would you do this for us? We are not of the same station, and you owe us nothing." His expression grew serious. "You misunderstand me. This is not merely an act of charity. It is a matter of principle. I care for you, and I cannot bear the thought of your family enduring hardship because of financial needs." Tears welled in Elizabeth's eyes as she contemplated his words. The weight of her own feelings pressed heavily upon her. "You have shown me a side of yourself that I never expected," she admitted, her voice trembling. "And in doing so, you have awakened feelings within me that I thought were buried." Darcy's heart leaped at her admission. "Then let us take our time, Elizabeth. I would rather wait for your heart to align with mine than rush into a marriage that lacks true affection." With a tentative smile, Elizabeth nodded, feeling a warmth spread through her. "Perhaps, in time, we can find a way to bridge the gap between us." As they stood together in the fading light, a new understanding began to blossom, one rooted in respect and the promise of love that could flourish at its own pace. In that moment, both knew that their journey was just beginning, and the path ahead, though uncertain, was filled with the potential for happiness. Epilogue. As they drove from their wedding feast towards their house in London, the glow of the evening sun cast a warm hue over the newlyweds, Elizabeth and Fitzwilliam Darcy. The air was filled with the sweet scent of blooming flowers from nearby gardens, and the distant sound of laughter and music from their wedding feast lingered in their hearts. Elizabeth turned to Darcy, her eyes sparkling with joy. "These past weeks have truly been the happiest of my life," she confessed, her voice light and playful. "I often find myself regretting that I did not recognize the treasure you were sooner." Darcy, with a teasing smile, raised an eyebrow. "Am I the only treasure you speak of, my dear Elizabeth?" he inquired, his tone light, yet his gaze earnest. She chuckled softly, shaking her head. "Oh no, my love. While you are indeed a treasure beyond compare, my experiences during the difficult times have also become invaluable to me. They have shaped me, given me strength, and taught me resilience. Each challenge I faced has turned into a gem of wisdom, one that I cherish deeply." Darcy's expression softened, and he took her hand, intertwining their fingers. "You possess a remarkable spirit, Elizabeth. It is that very strength that drew me to you. You have a way of finding beauty even in hardship, and it is a treasure I admire greatly. Let us promise to treasure each other and the lessons life brings us," Darcy suggested, his voice filled with sincerity. "Agreed," Elizabeth replied, her heart swelling with love. "For every treasure we uncover, whether in joy or in sorrow, will only make our bonds stronger." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow through the window, Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy found themselves nestled in the cozy confines of their drawing room. The air was filled with the soft scent of blooming jasmine from the garden, and the gentle crackle of the fireplace added a comforting ambience to the evening. Elizabeth, her eyes sparkling with mischief, turned to her husband with a playful grin. "So, Mr. Darcy," she began, her tone teasing, "how do you propose we start our married life? Surely there must be a grand plan." Darcy, ever the composed gentleman, met her gaze with a smile that reached his eyes. "Well, my dear Elizabeth," he replied, his voice steady yet warm, "I believe we should begin with prayer. After all, we have so much to thank God for." Elizabeth's laughter rang through the room, a sound that filled Darcy's heart with joy. "Prayer, you say? I can only agree, with my whole heart."